So today, we're diving into a pretty huge shift in how we're starting to understand our own minds. We're talking about moving past these really rigid labels and instead looking at the incredible, complex spectrum of what it actually means to be human. This whole idea of neurodiversity. Have you ever done this? You're driving and you just start making up nonsense words out loud just to hear how they sound? Or maybe you're walking down the street, music blasting in your headphones, and you start imagining that the people walking towards you are the ones singing the song. You know, it's those little moments that might make you stop and ask yourself that one big question: am I normal? Well, that one little question is exactly where we're going to start. We are going to totally unpack this myth of normal, and then we'll see what's happening now that diagnostic labels for things like ADHD and autism are starting to blur together. We're going to explore a completely new way of understanding the brain, look at the biology behind it, the very real human cost of our old ways of thinking, and finally, what we all stand to gain by embracing the full, amazing spectrum of the human mind. Okay, so let's just jump right in and tear apart that big idea. What do we even mean when we say something, or, someone, is normal? Here's the thing about normal. It's not really a biological fact, not at all. It's usually just a description of what most people are used to, like, say, eating soup with a spoon. Or it's just a statistical average. It's really all about habits and numbers, not some kind of fixed truth about our bodies or brains. Let's take the height of women in Germany, for instance. If you plot it out, you get that classic bell curve, right? The big hump in the middle is where most people land. That's the statistical norm. But does that make someone taller or shorter abnormal? Of course not. It just means they're not in the statistical majority. And you know what? The exact same logic applies to our brains. And that leads us to this really beautiful and powerful concept, neurodiversity. It's this idea that variations in how our brains work are completely natural and are just as vital as biodiversity is to a healthy ecosystem. Think about it. Nature needs variety to thrive, and humanity is no different. We are so much stronger because we have all these different ways of thinking and seeing the world. Okay, so if normal is kind of a fuzzy concept, then what about our official diagnostic labels? Things like ADHD and autism. Well, as it turns out, the lines there are getting blurrier by the day. Get a load of this number. A major study found that 27% of autistic adults who don't have an intellectual disability also have an ADHD diagnosis. That is 10 times higher than in the general population. That's no coincidence. It's a massive clue that these conditions are way more connected than we ever thought. And this overlap, it's not just between autism and ADHD. We see it all over the place. Take a look at autism spectrum conditions, or ASC, and borderline personality disorder, PPD. Both can mean challenges with social stuff, with understanding emotions, with building trust. And you see that last point? The overlap is so big it often leads to diagnostic uncertainty, which is a problem that hits women especially hard. But here's the twist. This blurring of the lines, it isn't a problem we need to fix. It's actually a signpost. It's pointing science towards a completely revolutionary new model for understanding the human mind.
What we're seeing is this massive paradigm shift. We're finally moving away from that old categorical way of thinking, where you either have a condition or you don't. You're in the box or you're out. And we're moving toward a dimensional approach. So instead of just yes or no labels, we're looking at continuous traits. Instead of seeing two separate disorders happening at once, we're seeing it as part of one shared biological continuum. And the focus is shifting away from just what doctors can see on the outside to what people are actually experiencing on the inside.
And the best part? This isn't just some abstract theory. This is a reality that, thanks to some mind-blowing new technology, we can actually see happening right inside the brain. So scientists have developed this incredible new method called transport-based morphometry, or TBM. It's this wild new way of analyzing brain scans that's based on the actual physics of how our brains grow and form. And using this, researchers can now spot the structural patterns in the brain that are linked to specific genes associated with autism. And they can do it with up to 95% accuracy. I mean, we are finally cracking that gene-brain behavior code. Now, this research has uncovered something absolutely crucial. Listen to this. It's the severity of someone's traits, not their specific diagnostic label, that actually lines up with these patterns in the brain. So, for example, more severe autistic traits are linked to more connectivity between certain brain networks. And it doesn't matter if that person's chart says autism or ADHD.
It all points to a shared biological process that just cuts right across those old, outdated lines. It shows us how deeply linked these experiences really are. Now look, this isn't just some academic debate. This old system, with its rigid and ill-fitting labels, has had a really profound and honestly painful human cost, especially for people who just don't fit into those classic stereotypes. This quote from people who have actually lived with ADHD, man, it just says everything. Not being seen, not being recognized, not being diagnosed, nor treated. That feeling, that damaging experience, it comes directly from these old models that just don't reflect reality. A huge piece of this puzzle is a phenomenon called masking or camouflaging. It's the absolutely exhausting, conscious effort of hiding your true, authentic traits just to try and fit in with social expectations. This is incredibly common for women and girls, whose experiences of ADHD and autism often look really different from the male-centric models our old diagnostic books were based on. And what's the result of all that masking? Well, the underlying neurodivergence just gets completely missed. And instead, what gets diagnosed are all the secondary conditions that pop up from the constant stress of hiding who you are. Things like anxiety, OCD, or, like we talked about earlier, borderline personality disorder. The actual root cause just stays totally invisible. So, what happens when we finally start to move past these rigid, outdated labels? What do we actually stand to gain? Well, we get a much clearer picture of reality, for one. And we unlock the incredible creative power of different kinds of minds working together. There's this wonderfully simple study that just illustrates this perfectly. They asked teams to build the tallest tower they could using only dry spaghetti and modeling clay. The results were fascinating. The teams that were made up of only neurotypical people and the teams made up of only autistic people, they tended to build very similar-looking towers. But the mixed, neurodiverse teams, whoa, they came up with this huge variety of wildly different, way more creative structures. And that, right there, is the key takeaway. Diversity of thought isn't just some nice, fluffy idea. It is essential for creativity, for problem solving, for progress. By moving away from these problematic standards and this tyranny of the average, we're finally starting to get it. Our differences are not deficits. They are the very engine that drives us forward. Which leaves us with one last thought. As these old, rigid boxes and labels finally start to fade away, and they're replaced by this more fluid, more dimensional, more accurate understanding of the mind, it forces us all to ask a new question. The question isn't, am I normal anymore? The real question is, how should we understand ourselves?